My name is Paige Newman, curator here at the VMHC. As we're starting this program, feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A. And my wonderful colleague, Haley Fenner, who's working all the magic behind the scenes, will let me know. So welcome to this morning's Curator Conversations. Thanks to our members, everything we do as a museum is only possible through your support. We have two programs associated with Cheers Virginia. Virginia Distilled is Saturday, September 17th, where we'll explore Virginia spirits. And on Saturday, October 15th, is Virginia Vines, where we'll enjoy wine from Virginia. These exhibits and more, you can find information about these exhibits and events and programs on our website, virginiahistory.org. So welcome to Cheers Virginia. This exhibit offers a brief history of the making of wine, beer, spirits, cider, and mead in Virginia, and explores the related traditions and experiences that have played important roles in our communities. Alcohol has been a part of life of the Commonwealth for more than 4 centuries. Since the arrival of Europeans, winemaking, brewing, and distilling have been the work of Virginians. Shaped by the state's natural resources and the innovation and creativity of its makers, Virginia plays a unique role in the history of alcohol in America. So we're going to start with alcohol in early Virginia. American colonists consumed roughly 3 times the amount of alcohol as people do today. The entire family imbibed each day, including children who drank diluted versions of what was in the adults' glasses. At a time when drinking water brought a risk of illness from bacteria or other contaminants, alcoholic drinks provided a relatively safe option. So one of the objects we have here is a reproduction of a broadside that was printed in 1622. And it's the inconveniences that have happened to some persons which have transported themselves. And what it is, it's a list of supplies that English colonists should bring with them to Virginia. Under victual is one of aqua vitae or aqua vitae, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This translates to water of life and is a term used to refer to distilled spirits. So making alcohol in early Virginia. In the 1600s, alcohol production was primarily a household task performed by women, servants, and the enslaved. As the process became more industrialized, large-scale manufacturing was almost exclusively overseen by men. Although the science and technology applied to the production and manufacturing of alcohol have changed a great deal, brewing, winemaking, and distilling remain complex crafts that rely on the skilled hand of the maker. An object in this section is a decanter from the early 1700s. By the 1600s, it became customary to pour wine from its original bottle into a jug or other type of container before serving. Most wines were shipped unfiltered and contained sediment that couldn't be seen when served from stoneware containers. Decanting helped rid the wine of any sediment that collected during the aging process. Haley, there's other objects that are in this section of the exhibit, but we're going to move on to distilled spirits. So Virginia is said to be the birthplace of American spirits. Using corn, the Reverend George Thorpe distilled the first batch of whiskey in 1620. The popularity of distilling grew steadily during the 1700s in Virginia and throughout the American colonies. By 1810, more than 3,500 distilleries were registered in Virginia. Most were small, local, or household operations. The growth of commercial and distilling was accompanied by battles over licensing and taxation. Social movements promoting moderation or abstinence from drinking alcohol gained public support during the 1800s. Prohibition in Virginia was enacted in 1916 and did not curb the public taste for ardent spirits. When Prohibition ended in 1933, Virginia laws made small batch distilling virtually impossible for over 65 years. So George Washington, who opened up a distillery in 1797, as he was ending his term as president. Urged by his farm manager, James Anderson, and the potential to make a profit, the distillery at Mount Vernon became one of the largest distilleries in the country. These two glasses, these fluted glasses, have a design of hop and barley, and once belonged to Washington, who enjoyed drinking a variety of beverages, including fortified wines like Madeira, port, rum, punch, and porter, which is a style of beer. So from distilled spirits to wine, winemaking was listed among the possible revenue generating industries considered by the settlers of Jamestown. In 1619, the House of Burgesses passed Act 12, which required every male householder to plant 10 vines of European grapes for making wine. Some European vines were brought to Virginia, but ultimately failed to grow. In the early 1830s, Richmond physician and horticulturist Dr. Daniel Norton developed a disease-resistant hybrid grape, later dubbed the Norton grape, that produced a flavorful red wine. The Norton became the premier grape of Virginia, and the state was one of three largest producers of wine before Prohibition ended the industry in 1920. The modern era of Virginia winemaking is less than 40 years old, and today the state is one of the top 5 winemaking regions in the country. Through those years, I don't know if you enjoy wine like I do, but you've probably noticed that the wine glass has also gotten larger. The capacity of the average wine glass increased by 7 times between 1700 and 2017. Centuries ago, glassware was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. As glassware became easier to produce, it became accessible to more people. Wine has also become more popular since the 1960s due to greater affordability and availability. A few objects in this section. We have a bottle of Virginia Claret from the Monticello Wine Company. Monticello Wine Company was founded in 1873 by local grape growers, and the company was best known for its Virginia Claret wine made with Norton grapes. The success of the company led Charlottesville to declare itself the capital of the wine belt of Virginia. And right below it, we have 2 wine glasses of Patrick Henry. So orator and politician Patrick Henry, before he entered politics or delivered his famous "Give me liberty" or "Give me death" speech, Henry worked as a bartender at Hanover Tavern in Hanover, Virginia, with his first wife, Sarah Shelton. So from wine, we go to beer. So early Virginians homebrewed small beer, a low alcohol variety consumed throughout the day, and brown beers like porters and stouts. Eastern European immigrants introduced lager beer to Americans in the mid-1800s. Improvements in refrigeration and manufacturing made lagers easier to produce and increased their popularity. The US beer market was dominated by a handful of large domestic brewers in the decades following Prohibition. A resurgence of homebrewing beer in the 1970s led to a quickly growing craft beer movement. Legislation passed in 2012 eased restrictions on the opening of new breweries in Virginia and allowed products to be served on site. So one of the objects in the beer section is a Robert Portner Brewing Company beer mug. Robert Portner immigrated to the United States from Germany and settled in Alexandria, Virginia. When the Civil War started, Portner and a partner opened a grocery store together. Federal troops living in the city drove up demand for alcohol, and Portner gathered investors to start a brewery. The mug, it's right in the middle, it's Tivoli, which is I love it spelled backwards, and was the name of a popular lager made by the brewing company, and which operated from 1869 to 1916. we're gonna walk over to cider. So cider was a centuries-old drink when European colonists lived in Jamestown and was consumed regularly by men, women, and children. Colonists brought cider-making skills and apple seedlings with them to Virginia. The popularity of hard cider declined in the late 1800s with the influx of German and Eastern European immigrants who preferred beer. The temperance movement and later prohibition encouraged farmers to start growing crops on land previously used for apple orchards. One of the objects in the cider is a crabapple brandy bottle. Martin Distilling Company, which is the bottles from, you can catch that on the list, operated from 1909 to 1916 in Roanoke, Virginia. Apple brandy is made from distilled cider and was a popular colonial area beverage. So here we're on to mead. Mead is an alcoholic drink produced by fermenting honey and water and is often considered to be the ancestor of all fermenters. European colonists introduced honeybees to Virginia, as well as the tradition of making mead. The drink fell out of favor as cider and beer became the preferred beverages. And as we're walking to another section, here is what I have to thank friends and colleagues for helping me create this collection and also drinking it with me. But we wanted to show just the various label art on beers and ciders and mead and wine. It's like as a way to visually communicate with the consumer, the label interprets the ingredients, name, and style of the beverage into a work of art. So I sort of judge what I drink by the label, but I'm curious if you all do too. So just thought this would be a fun way to show just the variety of labels, the great art on a lot of it, and just the variety of beers from around Virginia. So crafting attitudes about alcohol. I've already mentioned prohibition and temperance a few times, but it's alcohol, so we have to continue talk about that. So alcohol production and consumption has been a major part of the economy, culture, and history of the United States. But attitudes about drinking have been challenged and evolved over time. A movement to encourage Americans to consume less alcohol, stressing the injury drunkenness did to families, known as the temperance movement, began about 1800. Support for total ban on alcohol gained momentum, and legislation to outlaw the manufacture and sale of alcohol began when Congress ratified the 18th Amendment to the US Constitution in 1919. Another one of my favorite items is the repeal of the 18th Amendment, more beer, less taxes scarf. The 18th Amendment to the US Constitution banned the manufacture, sale, and transportation of intoxicating liquors. Virginians bought their last legal drink on Halloween night in 1916, more than 3 years before national prohibition was enacted. Here are a few other things from our collection. I'd like to point out, you can, for licensing, so my vote goes wet. There's a little pen here. That means that you are for licensing the sale of intoxicating liquors. If you were dry, you were against it. But Chowning's Tavern in Williamsburg, this is the front of this, I guess, pamphlet that they printed up. And then this is the back. And the back is the moral and physical thermometer. It was reprinted from the Gentleman's Magazine from May 1780. It outlines the dangers, vice, and punishments associated with intemperance, while associating drinking only water as a pathway toward health and wealth. So you see water at the top, and then I know Haley already got in there, but let's see, gin and rum. You see vices, burglary, murder, And yeah, diseases, melancholy, sadness, and then let's see, punishments. Well, whipping, the hulks, Botany Bay, and the gallows.
Ultimately, you mean the gallows.
Ultimately, and the gallows. So we couldn't do an exhibit on alcohol without celebrating some bartenders. So the bartender's practice, mixology, the art of and craft of mixing drinks. New York saloon keeper, Jerry Thomas, considered the father of American mixology, believed no excellent drink could be made from anything but the highest quality ingredients. Jerry Thomas also wrote the first, a published book on recipes, which we also have in the exhibit. And I'll show you that as we're going through. We're gonna move over to the trophy cup and John Dabney. So the inscription on the trophy cup, on this silver trophy cup reads, "Complimentary to John Dabney from the citizens of Richmond, Virginia, champion julep." There's an image of Dabney here. Dabney's hailstorm julep might be the blueprint for all mint juleps. Dabney shaved ice with a carpenter's plane, piled it up into a silver goblet, similar to this, then topped it off with flowers and fruit. Dabney was renowned bartender and caterer to upper-class white Richmonders. Head of the kitchen and bar at the Exchange Hotel and Ballard House in downtown Richmond, which there's an image over there. He went on to establish a successful catering business that he continued to operate until his death in 1900. So I'd mentioned Jerry Thomas, The Bartender's Guide. It was published in 1862. And pretty sure it's thought to be the first cocktail recipe book published in America. So we move on, we've shown a lot. This is more 20th, 21st century, but it's crafting community. The growing popularity of craft alcohol during the past 20 years is in part the result of the changing role that craft alcohol makers are playing in their communities. Today, Virginia boasts over 750 independent breweries, distilleries, wineries, cideries, and meaderies. Although these businesses focus on the production of alcohol, and many of Virginia's craft makers have created places where the community can gather to share stories and experiences. Craft makers are creators, collaborators, and innovators who are helping educate, inspire, and reinvent the way people engage with craft alcohol. One object, I guess you could say two objects in this exhibit in this section is the Black is Beautiful beer cans. And Black is Beautiful initiative is a collaboration among the brewers to raise awareness of the injustices experienced by people of color. In 2020, Weathered Souls Brewing Company, a Black-owned brewery in San Antonio, Texas, shared a stout recipe with participating breweries nationwide. All the proceeds from the sales of this beer go to local organizations that support equality, inclusion, and social justice reform. I enjoyed those a couple months ago. Hardywood, this was one of Hardywood's Black is Beautiful for 2022 brews. And we're gonna walk over to another one of my favorite items in this exhibit is the Tipler's thermometer. And I'm gonna read from here pretty much. I send you the enclosed that you may measure your capacity for juleps by the Tipler's thermometer. Have I marked you all right? So wrote a nephew to his uncle he nicknamed the Duke of Richmond in 1852. A tippler was known as a retailer of ale or tavern keeper. The term eventually became another name for a habitual drinker. The thermometer offers a humorous illustration showing various levels of drunkenness and the terms used to describe them in the mid-1800s. So similar to the physical and moral thermometer, I guess very dry would be water, and it would typically go up the more you drink, and depending on probably maybe different alcohols were associated with it. So it goes from very dry to can lay on the ground without a holding. This guy has lost his hat already. So we want to just give you a preview of the exhibit with hopes that you come to see us. There will be a virtual exhibit at some point, but we'd prefer if you came to visit us here. But just checking if there's any questions.
Yeah, so I have a question for you
Okay.
while we wait for folks to submit. What is the coolest thing you learned while making this exhibit?
I think the coolest thing I learned was that a couple things. That honeybees weren't native to Virginia. The colonists brought honeybees with them. Also, cider making apples. Those types of apples were not native to Virginia. So the colonists brought those over. So I think it's thinking that we've always had these ingredients in Virginia, but the fact that these were introduced with, I mean, the focus to, one, make alcohol, or as a way. I mean, obviously with food too, but as make cider and mead.
Yeah. Is there any evidence of Native Americans brewing that we know?
Not yet. Let's put it this way. I mean, I'm speaking of Virginia only, but not yet. George Thorpe, who I mentioned, distilled spirits. It was indigenous corn they used to distill the whiskey, and more we took indigenous, like how to plant certain like corn and other seeds from indigenous people. It's what they taught the colonists for sure. But yeah, can't find it yet. I know I've talked to a few historians and beer historians and still haven't found any evidence. But if someone knows of evidence, please contact me because we definitely are interested.
So I feel like we have a lot in our collection related to alcohol. How often do you find things like this Tippler's thermometer in our collection?
Rarely. And actually I'd seen the moral and physical thermometer of the Challenge Tavern advertisement before, but then when I saw this and for some reason clicked in my head, let's say probably about 5 or 6 years ago, or maybe a little longer, saw this and it was like, oh, these things were real. I mean, Tippler's thermometer, or this is 1850s, that was 1780s, I think even earlier, like 1700s when the moral and physical thermometer was made. But just the fact that there was this gauge, someone has called this the visual breathalyzer, but then that the effects of alcohol and to always balance it out with moderation is nothing new.
Yeah.
So that's what is just interesting in that. And I have to say in our collection, we have largely more prohibition related items than we did anything else. We have a lot of bottles, which is nice. A lot of whiskey bottles empty. Obviously some of the wine labels, but surprised that hopefully this might increase our collection a little bit. When we do exhibits, it's always interesting to see what we already are strong in and then what we aren't. And then that we can maybe go out and make those, add those things to our collection objects. Yeah.
So we have a strong prohibition collection.
Oh yeah, we do. Yeah.
Well, I don't encourage us to do it.
Nah. Library of Virginia did a great prohibition exhibit. I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago. In my head, maybe it is. Maybe that was 10 years ago. But so we didn't feel we needed to, repeat that.
Yeah. So we got a question from an attendee. How much or where in Virginia can you find mead?
Oh,
where's it made?
Oh my gosh, there's lots of places now. Well, definitely Richmond. There's mead. The gentleman, we had a modern maker and he is up near Winchester. Yeah, bingo. Richard's up in Winchester and Shenandoah Valley, Misty Mountain Mead Works. there's other places. It's easy to, if you Google it, I know that's horrible to say, to look online for mead, but I feel I know in Richmond or right near Richmond too. I should have prepared better for that.
Is there a particular region where mead does better? Like, like wine grows best in the Blue Ridge, right?
Yeah, like Shenandoah.
Does it
Yeah.
matter with mead?
I think it depends on their different tastes, because the bees are getting, pollen from where it's grown. It depends on where they purchase the honey to, or if they make it themselves.
Oh,
Because I believe with Misty Mountain that it's Shenandoah Valley honey. So it's going to have, just like where breweries set up to the water that they have to use also changes the taste of the beer they're brewing.
Speaking of taste,
Yeah.
you want to show them what they can do?
Definitely. So we did a little thing on tastings, because it's a great way and also educational way to learn about different types of alcohol. And pretty much every brewery, winery, distillery, cidery, meadery, we do tasting flights and kind of focus on a few things. One, it's the experience. Hopefully you're having a good time. But there's three things. We got mouthfeel, which is how the beverage feels in your mouth, and how it creates the aroma. So taking in smell of the beverage, and then color. Because they say I've read, you taste with your eyes first. So you want to look at the color. And one of our little interactions here is to create your own label. So mad libations, if anyone got that, but to get an idea of, these are descriptions from real labels from various places around Virginia. And just wanted and some tasting tips. So hopefully that's a great way to learn. And you get to taste a variety of different types of whatever beverage that place is making.
So we talked a little about prohibition. So we want to know, how did taverns, like the one you showed earlier,
Yes.
survive prohibition?
How did they serve what?
How did they survive?
Well, they're okay. So taverns, well, they were also a place to stay, a place to eat. I'm sure there were some other things going on that we're not going to talk about, so they don't have to pay taxes. Yeah. But another way that alcohol, or at least spirits, was served for medicinal reasons. People could obtain it for medicinal reasons or religious reasons. So there are ways of getting alcohol. It just had to be within the government confines of what was allowed. But also, as we know, with moonshine, there are other ways to do it. So again, like I said, Library of Virginia did a great exhibit on prohibition, and we have to mention moonshiners and some, prohibition-like things, but we didn't go overboard with it. This is more of an exhibit on production and kind of what alcohol is in the history of Virginia. But yeah, we do have the moonshiners.
So taverns probably still were able to serve food and survive.
Yeah.
So can you think of any other times where breweries have had, or alcohol makers have sort of had to shift gears? Like, have there been any other instances in history where they've sort of had to shift?
I think prohibition.
COVID?
Oh, COVID. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Sorry. I'm thinking, wait, I lived through COVID. COVID's still going on. So yeah, so they did. And we want to walk back over to this part. Yes. Thank you, Haley. Prohibition. So during the pandemic of 2020, especially distilleries were quick to react. Instead of making what they usually make, a lot of distilleries started making hand sanitizer. And so they quickly of hand sanitizer and other alcohol-based products to help combat the spread of COVID. And the other item besides the hand sanitizer is Strange Ways Brewing came out, I feel like almost immediately, because I think I picked that up in April of 2020, the COVID sucks label type of beer. So that was a quick shift to that. So yes, thank you for bringing that up.
So then we just have a comment about Thomas Jefferson
Yes.
being known for making wine. Are there other sort of notable Virginia winemakers?
Well, I think that's another thing is learn a lot of people that I didn't know that were notable. And not intentionally, Jefferson is mentioned in this exhibit. And with each of the sections, we focus on a historical maker and a modern maker. And since we're talking about wine, well, we're talking about Jefferson. Filippo Mazzei, he worked with Jefferson to figure out how to successfully grow grapevines and make wine in Virginia. So he brought several European vine cuttings to plant here in the Commonwealth. And he had investors, and actually George Washington was one of the subscribers, as they call them, to invest. But the project ended because of weather and also environment, because European vines didn't grow well in Virginia, but also American Revolution was another reason it wasn't successful. Modern maker called Rousey, as he's the father of the modern Virginia wine industry. So in the 1970s, he came to work at the request of a winemaker who needed, working at Barbersville Vineyards, in Charlottesville. And so he successfully grafted vines from Jefferson's 1807 varietals for Monticello in 1984. And over the years, he's helped dozens of wineries and assisted with planting more than just dozens of vineyards. And then in 1997, he started his own winery. So he's the father. We have John June Lewis Sr., who doing this research I found out about, but he's believed to be the first Black-owned winery in the United States in Clarksville, Virginia. So Woburn Winery was opened by Lewis between the 1940s and 1960s is when he operated it.
I don't see any more questions here. We'll give folks
Okay.
another minute, just sort of a last call. For folks that have, oh.
Hey,
I did
yeah.
that. Yes, last call. But while we wait, can you just tell us what is your favorite object in this exhibition? Or I mean, I guess it could be a manuscript.
I know. They're all my favorites. Well, I kind of showed you the scarf and the Tipler's thermometer. I have to say, and we worked with Department of Historic Resources and Jamestown for a few of the earlier items in the exhibit. But I think it's the corkscrew, which I was pretty surprised it looked the same, very similar in design, but this corkscrew is from the late 1700s. And before we had corks, wax cloth was used as a stopper for the bottles. I know, weird.
Oh.
So that was one thing, but they're saying, well, what I read and figured out in research, that the first corkscrew may have been inspired by a shaped tool that was used to clean guns. And maybe that's what soldiers were using, to get the corks out of the bottles. I don't know. So yeah, so that's one thing.
Paige, I think
Is
that
that?
is what we've got
Okay.
It's been fun.
It has been fun. So yeah, thank you all for joining us this morning and for your continued membership support of the VMHC. So for more information, please go to our website, virginiahistory.org. If you have any more questions or comments, feel free to email me at pnewman@virginiahistory.org. Love to hear more. And hopefully we'll get to see you in the building and in the exhibit soon. Take care.